Hello, this is Dr. Nuke, and right now I'd like to talk to you about baling hay in Vermont. Vermont still has a considerable number of dairy farms operating within its borders, and the farms have cows that are raised for milk production. And the cows, some of what they eat is natural grazing on pasture land, but the cows are also fed by the farmers. They're given hay, which is basically just grass that's been allowed to grow tall and then is chopped and baled or whatever. Hay, and there's also they're given grain sometimes. Sometimes they're given a relatively small amount of grain, and also they're given silage, which is chopped corn, the whole plant, the stalk, the leaves, the cob, not just the kernels, but the whole cob gets chopped up and put in silos, and that is fed to the cows throughout the year. There's also something called haylage, which is chopped hay put in a silo. Well, anyway, the hay, after it is cut in the field, is left on the field to dry. If there's no rain, it dries fairly quickly, in a few days, longer if there's rain. After the hay is dried, it is then baled. It is more, oftentimes you see in Vermont nowadays these gigantic bales that are like big round things that are like, 5 or 6 feet wide. But when I worked on a dairy farm once, they used bales that were maybe about this wide by this wide, and that that long. Maybe they were heavy because they were dense. And what they did was they put them in the hay mow above where the cows were kept in the barn, and the stuff was stacked from wall to wall, floor to ceiling inside the hay storage area above where the cows were. And then throughout the year they would throw bales down through a hole in the floor, and the hay would be given to cows. Baling hay and putting the hay up in the barn is hard work. Very hard work. And throwing bales around to feed the cows is hard work because those bales are heavy. Well, anyway, that's baling hay in Vermont. There might be, in the future, less need for it if we depend less on animals for our food in the future, which that would be beneficial to the environment as well as to the animals, to rely less on animals for our food. Of course, milk is something that is good for us, and substitutes like soy milk aren't all that satisfying. Maybe they'll figure out some way of growing a cow's mammary gland in the lab without the rest of the cow, sort of like lab grown meat, but instead of growing tissue to be eaten, you grow tissue to produce milk and then use the milk. That might, who knows? I've never heard anything about that, but who knows? Maybe for down the road sometime they'll be doing that. And instead of having dairy farms with cows producing milk, they'll have factories producing milk from cell cultures in the lab. Then what would Vermont farmers do if they no longer had cows? Well, there's plenty of other things they could do. There's other crops, vegetable crops, grains, root crops like potatoes and beets, and various vegetables. Sugar, even, could be a crop for Vermont. Sugar beets could be grown and processed into refined sugar as a substitute for cane sugar. Sugar beets can be grown in Vermont. In fact, my mother in her backyard in northern Vermont grew sugar beets just for the sake of growing them. I guess the animals liked them, so she didn't get much out of them, and that difficulty would have to be addressed. Maybe a field full of sugar beets could have little robots in it that keep the animals at bay without hurting them, of course. Well, we'll see what the future holds. And of course, some of the land that's farmed might not even be needed for farming at all if we greatly reduced our consumption of animal products. Some of it maybe could revert back to forest. I would advocate for Vermont to maximize its agricultural production as much as possible by converting land from animal food production to food for humans, grains, vegetables, root crops, etc. Vastly increase food production. Say for every 1,000 calories of food that Vermont produces now, produce 5,000 calories of food. And still, it might be possible to allow some of the farmland to revert to forest. And the farming that is done, they could use regenerative agriculture and use biochar to sequester carbon into the soil. Well, anyway, please like, share, subscribe, comment. This is Dr. Nuke signing off.